Hello, students. I am still at home with COVID. At least I am testing positive still. I probably am not going to be in tomorrow, which is Monday, so I've decided to record another video lesson for you so that you're not going to be missing out on my wonderful dulcet tones booming through the classroom. All right, the last one that I did was the OIP, which involved 13 reasons why. I've also done Blade Runner in 2 lessons, and the reason for that is that we've now got two or sort of film television texts which we can now discuss because they're familiar. You're familiar with them and you know what we're talking about. Um, so the IYP was probably a very good choice. Now, so to begin with, I think with film and television scripts, you do need to be familiar with the basic features of them, and I would imagine that if they do use one, they are going to be using a film script, which is going to have all of the abbreviations and shortcuts and you should be able to recognize the conventions of a film script, and you should be able to comment on how those conventions are used to convey meaning to the audience. So you've got a little bit of confusion here because the audience of a film script is in fact a director or a producer. So a film script is essentially a set of instructions. It's got the dialogue, but it also works like a play script. It has a set of instructions for the director or the actor as to how a scene should be actually shot. As we'll see, some of what comes off a film script as it eventually ends up on the screen is actually very different. So very different from possibly, and that's why you get all these arguments between script writers and directors, because the director will have their own particular angle on how the scene should be shown or what should be revealed. The problem is that you've got really two audiences to talk about. You've got the audience of the film script, which is a producer or director, and then you have the audience of the final product, the film, which is the general film going audience. Most movies will have a very particular audience in mind. 13 Reasons Why is very clearly a teenage high school drama, which raises some very important questions and has some very serious themes about, sort of what happens to the lives of young people. It was very mature in that it was dealing with some pretty interesting problems. Okay, so if we look at a film script, and just I guess this is not going to turn up the exam, but we do start with a cover page. This is the 13 Reasons Why script, which I managed to track down. Notice that the script for the pilot was different from the the final version that came out. There were things that were cut out and things that were included. Okay, so what you will have is it looks, does look really uh, basically, so you've got the instructions there in black. So in other words, it comes in on a black screen, opens on the image of the locker, and you have the sound, the song, Colin and Carolyn sing More Than Gravity. Okay, so we have a description of what we should be seeing on the screen. A locker, half-height locker, painted in royal blue that tries to be cheerful but just feels tired. Unlike stickered, scribbled, smudged lockers around it, ours is adorned, bare. We hold on it for boating. Okay, so then we have the voiceover. VO means voiceover. Hannah, obviously, the name of the character, is in capitals. I'll be going over this in more detail shortly. Reveal. Okay, so that means that the camera either pulls back or pans. So there's a reveal shot. Okay, so it's a Liberty High School, a hallway. As we pull back, so there's the instructions to the cameraman to more lockers surrounding ours like a silent gang. Now you'll notice that the language is actually quite literary. Like it's very sort of, this is not something that would, these are the instructions to the director, and yet we have, a metaphor. The lockers are standing around like a silent gang. Okay, the hall empty, quiet as a sleeping army. Nice bit of simile there. We have Hannah's voiceover. That's right. Don't adjust your device you're hearing this on. It's me, live and in stereo. A jittery bell rings. The carpet hallway erupts in students. They crowd the lockers around ours and pulling out books, shoving backpacks away. It's interesting how they're using the word ours like it's our locker. It's kind of, because it's very much the focus of the focus of the scene. So you've got Clay Jensen. This is Hannah's friend. Slams his locker shuts and turns to go. He stops cold, seeing something, and we see him doe-eyed and dimpled, handsome but watchful, describing how he should appear on the, what kind of actor we should have for this. Okay. That's young for his age, a face that's young for his age, but his eyes are older. We follow his gaze. Okay, so you can see here all of the basically the conventions, which again I'm going to go into detail. Now, there is probably not that much information that you're going to get from the slug line from a script. It just simply tells where the action is taking place. It could be significant in some ways. The setting could be significant to something that the author is, or the script writer is trying to get across. Perhaps it's just really important for you to be aware of the convention so that you know exactly what you're looking at. If you see it in the exam and you're wondering what all this int and ext stuff means, of course, it's the interior and exterior. The scene heading tells us where the scene is taking place. Is it interior or exterior? And then the location is named: bedroom, living room, baseball field. Okay. The It also might include whether or not it's continuous action, so it's following on from previous action, or it's an establishing shot. An establishing shot is where you have a shot, usually of a building, which tells the audience where the action is taking place. And if you look at sort of, some for example, those of you who are familiar with Friends, the television series which ran for years, the establishing shot, for example, is always there's a shot of the cafe, um, you know, where they meet, so that it's always tells us where the action is taking place. In 13 Reasons Why, establishing shot is in a school hallway, so we know that it's in. Okay, a stock shot is actually oftentimes just simply a stock piece of footage that they've taken from somewhere. So we have interior or exterior, where it's taking place, and when: morning, sunset, okay, that kind of thing. Um, we will have some sort of instruction as to the transition. I'll be talking about transitions in a moment. They also are not are something that may be significant. You could see some importance in the way that a shot is done, like the opening of 13 Reasons Why is very interestingly done. A slowly zooming in shot is going to focus the audience's attention on whatever is being zoomed in on. For example, if you began a television show or a movie with a zooming shot into a gravestone, a headstone in a graveyard, that would be suggesting what the themes are. Um, An establishing shot would possibly, in Blade Runner, we have Dante's Inferno in the opening sequence, and then we have the human eye, which implies the theme of humanity. So these little details shouldn't be ignored. I mean, you should keep an eye on all the little details which are mentioned in the script. You're not going to get the actual film in the exam, I should mention. You're going to get the script. This is the whole point of this, is to make sure that you understand how scripts work. Okay, action is always going to be in present tense. There's going to be sort of telling us exactly what happens. Its action sequences are often combined with dialogue. It does have a lot to do with the message that is being conveyed. There is a lot that can be said about action, and there's an awful lot of action which can take place in a script where there isn't, you know, the action actually does have an awful lot to say. You can focus on the dialogue as well, but action and dialogue together, what is actually happening on the screen. It's a little bit like making sure that you understand that if you're looking at an advertisement, how do the images and the words work together to convey meaning? On a screen, it is does the action and all the other elements of cinema, you know, the shots and so on and so forth, you need to mention. Your reply in the examination question is going to be all about analysing how the author conveys meaning to the intended audience. You need to analyse the audience of the media piece as well as the language which is used. Okay, so how could this script be interpreted? How could the action be interpreted? When we have action taking place, we have even the stuntmen who perform, you know, more acrobatic action might actually interpret it in a certain way. So remembering that scripts are very much like play scripts, in that they're really just the bare bones, and they can be interpreted in different ways, and mentioning the golden words depending on how it's staged. You can suggest that action, you know, how action can be interpreted. Okay, so we're looking at the script for A Quiet Place. This is a film, basically a post-apocalyptic film. I'm not going to tell you too much about it just yet. What I'd like you to do now is I'm going to stop talking. They stop cheering. Okay. What I'm going to stop talking. I want you to just read this. I'm going to give these slides about 5 seconds each, which means all you have to do is just pause the video at this point and read the next slide, and we'll read our way through the opening sequence of the film A Quiet Place. So pause now. Now we're going to see that sequence in the film, and let's see if you understood how it could be put together. So again, this is an establishing shot, the very first shot. Things don't look quite right. Why is she walking on tiptoes? Okay, so there's a couple of things in this. Obviously, you can see why I've chosen this particular piece of script, because the entire thing is all to do with action, and basically what we have is a lot of mise-en-scene, because the audience is not really aware of what's going on in the story or what's happening. Evidently, it is post-apocalyptic, and that was because of that shot of the wanted posters, people missing and so on. The fact that there's no other people, the floors are all dirty, there's leaves all over the roads, everything seems to be abandoned and run down. The other thing that's, again, the shot deliberately, the shoulder shot of the girl as she's walking down the corridor, we can see the cochlear implant. We understand that the family is actually deaf. We haven't encountered the father at this point. For those of you that are guessing as to what on earth is going on, Earth has been invaded by monsters, or they just magically appeared, or something, they appeared from somewhere, who hunt human beings using sound. Any sound, the slightest sound, will cause them to attack. And they can't actually see anyone, but they home in on sound. And so this is 89 days into the disaster, and most of human population's been wiped out, and the numbers of monsters has increased. So it was very interesting. It's a film almost silent, totally. There is virtually no sound unless it's really necessary. And it's very eerie, as a very, very effective. But you can see how the script produces this image. Okay, so we'll go on. We're looking at character names. All right, this is probably a pretty long shot. Um, Character names in a script could hold certain attitudes or towards people. I mean, it's a very minor thing, but it could be indicative of how a character is being represented. For example, how do they deal with people of color? How do they, what name do they give someone? So, for example, if somebody is called a young crone, you have to sort of ask yourself exactly how this came about. If you just, this is an example. This is not a script, a formal script. This is more like a play script. All right, so just pause this for as long as you like, and then unpause when you're ready. Okay, so now this is how, again, this script hit the screen, what it looked like.
Yes, Warwick, I'm long past entrusting myself to some deranged druid who gives her professional address as one dunghill mansion's Putney. Tell me, young crone, is this Putney?
Be. That it be.
Yes, it is, not that it be. You don't have to talk in that stupid voice to me. I'm not a tourist. I seek information about a wise woman.
The wise woman. The wise woman.
Yes, the wise woman.
Two things, my lord, must ye know of the wise woman.
Yes.
First, she is a woman. And second, she is...
Wise?
You do know her then?
No, just a wild stab in the dark, which is incidentally what you'll be getting if you don't start being a bit more helpful. Do you know where she lives?
Of course.
Where?
Here. Do you have an appointment?
No.
Well, you can go in anyway.
Thank you, young crone. Here is a purse of monies, which I'm not going to give to you.
All right, so that was just a bit of fun, but one of the things about that is that you can see how a script on a page can evolve into something on the screen. Right, the next one. Oh, this is the big one, the dialogue. Okay, dialogue is set up. It's oftentimes underneath the name of the character. The character's name is going to be in capital letters. Um, the way that if it's indented from the margin, it is indented so that notes can be made on the film script as to how the dialogue should be delivered. There's huge margins involved here. Um, okay, uh, so you do have dialogue comes as voiceovers. It could be a character speaking directly to another character. It could be in the form of a voiceover. There is a very important distinction here, because when you've got a character saying something to another character, it's how they are relating to other characters, and says things about the relationship. A voiceover, as we're going to see, is where their innermost thoughts and feelings can be represented on stage, the same way that a Shakespearean monologue works. I've mentioned that in due course. Okay, so the important thing is that good dialogue is the soul of the character. It's conversational. It needs to sound real. The audience needs to feel like a fly on the wall, hearing natural interplay between characters. So, okay, you may use common language, but in certain phrases in certain movies have lived forever. Like just a single line of dialogue have sometimes become a catchphrase or a cliche in modern popular culture. And as we hear here, as the line from Clint Eastwood's Dirty Harry, "Go ahead, make my day."
Go ahead. Make my day.
Call D'Ambrosio in the DA's office. Ask him if coffee is psychic.
Okay, so the point there is that when you've got a line like "Go ahead, make my day," if you have a line that is obviously on its own, it's kind of foregrounded in the text, it's it's given an emphasis, and it's the center point around which the action takes place, it's significant. You need to analyze it. You need to analyze, what does it actually mean? What does it actually mean in this case is that the Dirty Harry character would have absolutely no compunction in shooting that guy, if because he's got that sort of he doesn't sort of he has a very basic attitude towards policing, shall we say. It means basically it's sort of it's an indication of the attitude of the character, which you can talk about. You can talk about sort of um, the attitude that he has to crime and criminals, and the fact that he is a police officer has some disturbing implications to a modern audience. To the audience of the late 70s, which is when that film came out, it probably would have had a different impact. So there's an awful lot. Just a single line like that can really be, you've got to pull it to pieces and then think about what are the implications of that. Dialogue is probably the most important aspect of the script. Um, It needs to sound like it's very genuine by real characters. However, of course, you're going to have characters which are the product of fantasy. The example I've given there, such as Yoda from Star Wars. Obviously, characters are going to be different. So the kinds of dialogues you're going to be presented with in the examination will be everyday conversations. They're not going to go into anything too fanciful because you need to be able to understand what's going on and visualize what might be happening. So there's obviously the issue of how dialogue can be interpreted by an actor. So it can be performed in a particular way. It's an interchange between two or more characters, and if you look at the first character's lines and then reflect on how the second character is responding to them, ask yourself these questions. Does the second character understand what the first character is saying? Like, are they communicating? Are they connecting? Do we have these two characters coming from completely different sides of the earth, or are they on the same page? Do they do things like talk over the top of them, shout at them, cut across them, that kind of thing? Is one character more dominant than the other? Is the dialogue set up in such a way that you've got really short, clipped sentences by one character, long, elaborate sentences by the other? All of those things you need to look into. How is it actually delivered? So if I've mentioned there, have they murmured a reply to a strong statement or question? That would have to be in the script. It would have to be an instruction as to how that line should be delivered. So in other words, what does it reveal about the characters' relationship and how they are relating to each other? But it also has a lot to do with how how the writer is revealing the larger themes of the work and always hark back into a global issue, some sort of major issue. If it is representative in the text, you need to mention that in your analysis. Okay, so we're going to have a look at a script, and then we're going to see how that dialogue appeared in the final outcome. So we have Clay's house, the kitchen. Just to give you a little bit of context, okay, this is the package that was mysteriously delivered on his doorstep, which has the tapes from Hannah, which are all the tapes of her explaining why she decided to commit suicide. Now, I'm going to give you a few minutes to read each one of these. When you're finished, just pause for the moment, and then when you're finished reading, unpause, and I'll advance the next slide. So this is a set of questions which I'm going to put on Google Classroom for you to answer. I would like you to give written answers for these, analyzing that script. So you should now turn to Google Classroom, open up the appropriate task, and answer the questions just based on the script. Now, just pause the video while you are doing that, and after that we are going to look at how that scene actually appeared. But I want you to answer the questions now just based on the script, because that's what you're going to get in the exam. So answer those now in Google Classroom, and then when you're done, unpause the video and we'll have a look at what it looked like on screen. I guess one of the things that you do have to ask yourself is, does the scene appear on screen as you had imagined it when you read the script. I think this is one of the keys for the examination if you do encounter a film script or a television script, that you have to be able to imagine what it might look like on a screen. And then obviously one of the points about this one is that what appeared in the script and what actually ended up in the final edit of the series pilot was different, because there were bits and pieces of dialogue that he was asking very direct questions in the script about, have you survived puberty? Is adolescence okay? I think they took those out for various reasons. I'm not exactly sure why, but so obviously you have to deal with the script. I think the purpose of seeing the script and then looking at what it actually ended up looking like is really important, because it means you have to sort of visualize things, and you sort of then, once you've got a visualization of what the characters look like, what the scene looks like, then you can then tackle the message that is being conveyed by the script. All right, this is it's a minor thing. Parentheticals are an instruction, as I mentioned. How an instruction as to how a line should be delivered by an actor. Typically, they're not very used very often, but okay, parentheticals are wryly, sleepily. Getting out of bed is actually a stage instruction, so it just tells us, what's actually happening. But the words, why is he speaking wryly? Explain that. They're there for a reason. Trust me. Okay, as it's mentioned there, they should be only used very sparingly when absolutely necessary. If you see one, analyze it. Why is it there? What does it tell us about relationships and so on? So you need to analyze those. Extensions, as I mentioned before, is going to be off-screen sounds, where you've got a sound coming from off-screen, or off stage is the theatrical equivalent. A voiceover, very powerful. As I mentioned before, voiceovers are the internal dialogue, the thoughts and feelings of the character. And so we have some examples there. A voiceover allows uh, the author to convey thoughts and feelings of the character to the audience, much in the same way as a soliloquy does in theatre. So that's basically what I've just said. I've more or less just explained all of that. Again, voiceovers, you can connect these to a global issue, right? They can be used just simply to give some background or context to the plot, or they can be used to bring home a certain message to the audience. And I think, okay, there's two examples here of voiceovers used for various reasons. Okay, the first comes from 13 Reasons. Again, I'm using that one a lot because it does have some quite striking, it was quite a striking series. The main character is in fact already dead before we encounter her. So what we're doing is we're dealing with people's memories of her, and it's a dramatization of things that happened when she was alive. So she's speaking directly to the audience from the tapes that she's left behind in the opening sequence. To the uninitiated, the audience that has not doesn't know how the story is working. Um, it's not immediately obvious that this voiceover is from beyond the grave. Um, okay, the second is from our Blade Runner movie, which of course we're familiar with. This is, as I've mentioned, an example of possibly the most disastrous use of voiceovers in cinema history. They were just awful. The version of the film that you saw was the director's cut, which is the only one available really, because the first one was just horrible because of the voiceovers. and the happy ending. It was just awful. The voiceovers are just weird. I'll show you a few of those, but I can't stand them. So if you want to look them up on YouTube, feel free. Okay, so let's start with 13 Reasons. So this is the opening sequence from the script, which we've already had a look at the beginning of this video. At that point, I was just kind of like focusing you on things like, the names of the characters and voiceovers and int and in black. And so, okay, so if we want to look closely at sort of like the language, so, you've, as I mentioned, I think the first time around, I think it's got some very literary language in it. Like, and then, when you're doing your analysis, if you get something like this, focus on certain words. Like, for example, a jittery bell rings. Why jittery? I mean, it's sort of, why do we have that kind of, unpleasant high school bell noise? Again, I did mention, like, as we pull back to more lockers surrounding ours, like a silent gang metaphor, the hall empty, quiet as a sleeping army, simile. We have jostling, laughing, hurrying. This is to convey things to the director or the actors. The language that Hannah uses particularly is like very colloquial and very like we immediately warm to her as a character. Um, so the opening sequence, the combination of the shot, the music, the focus of the on the locker, which is completely festooned with cards and sort of flowers and things. It Pretty soon most people will pick up very quickly that we're listening to the voice of somebody who has committed suicide. So okay, so having read through that, you can pause it now if you like, just to read through that again, and then in a couple of seconds we'll proceed with the actual scene in from the television series.
You've only seen Ridley Scott's Final Cut.
Or not. Transitions are a fairly important way that information can be communicated to the audience. Transitions are moving from one camera shot to another. And transitions are oftentimes, there are stock transitions. There's an awful lot of them. It's very good to be able to have a command of those. You should probably, just should you be dealing with media text, in some cases, you will find that transitions are very significant. So the ones that I just mentioned here, I'll include a list of the most common ones. But you've got cutting to, which is a quick shot, dissolve to, one one shot will dissolve into the next. You've got quick cuts, fade to, fades out, so on and so forth. If a transition is used for an effect in a script, it tells you something about the motivation of the character or the theme. It's there for a reason. If they meant they have a transition in a script, comment on it. It's got to be there for a reason. For example, a long fade while focused on a character's face could suggest something about the storyline, or that some aspect of the plot has had an impact of them, so on and so forth.
Love the helmet.
We did look at shots in some details. There's really some very basic ones you must know. Obviously, you've got the distance from the camera or the zoom shot to the subject. So you've got an extreme close-up, medium shot, long shot. Those are fairly obvious. Panning shots is where the camera moves sideways or the actual position of the camera changes. It runs on a dolly sideways. You have reverse angles. So angles up, and then you've got a high angle shots, which denote usually power or threat of some kind, and then you've got a reverse shot from below, low camera angle, which shows weakness. There are so many different shots. This is a really short list of them. You can just read this on your own. You've got all kinds of different shots. I think it's just, again, like everything else, if a particular shot is mentioned, it's there for a reason. It's there to convey some idea, which you need to then comment on. I'll pause for a moment and then just pause the video for a moment just to read through those, and then I'm going to explain the effect of some of these. Okay, so if we're looking at shots, obviously low camera angles, lack of power or some kind of threat to the main character. This is a point of view shot because it's shot from the point of view of the character. We also have the inverse, of course, which is the high camera angles, which basically sort of, we have people looking up at the monster that they are intending to defeat, and it shows that the monster is bigger than them and it's going to be a challenge and so on and so forth. So high camera angles are oftentimes used to denote positions of power. So the Dutch angle is where you're tipping the camera off balance and you change you're changing the angle of the camera and it suggests confusion or chaos or some derangement of some kind, that things are not as they should be, combined with sort of like we have here. This is a shoulder shot. Over the shoulder in the background, we have the insane asylum. This is from the film 12 Monkeys, where the character finds himself in a insane asylum, and at this point he's questioning his own sanity, and so the camera angle kind of gives this sort of weird, deranged. And in the film, there's a zooming shot involved as well. So the overhead shot, which is directly 90 degrees, directly above the subject, focusing down, is done often for very, very clear reasons. It's suggestive of God's eye, the idea of retribution, or it's used very occasionally, but it suggests the idea of a much greater power looking down on a character. The shoulder level shot, as I mentioned before, it's different from a close-up because what it does do is it allows us to see what's else in the background. What's the mise-en-scene? What's in the background? And we have the Wolf of Wall Street. There he is in his tie, very, very well heeled, very, very well dressed gentleman. He's got his suit on. He's looking very calm. He's smiling. He's got that kind of evil glitter in his eyes. In the background, we have men that have their shirt sleeves rolled up, meaning they're working. They're panicking. There's this huge kerfuffle and chaos, sort of, there's busy work and panic and stress and pressure in the background, and yet here he stands almost untouched by the chaos in the background. And so shoulder level shots typically are sort of used to sort of establish things. What does the audience see in the background? Okay, the over-the-shoulder shot is used to show another character from the protagonist's viewpoint. It's not the same as a point of view shot. It suggests conflict. Whenever this kind of shot is being used, it's kind of always used to suggest the idea of conflict between two characters. It places the protagonist in the foreground and usually the villain standing in front of him. It's the kind of shot that we would see a lot in the old westerns. Use this one an awful lot. Just very quickly, there's a lot of abbreviations. I don't think that the IB would expect you to understand these, but some of these should be familiar. You probably would know what CGI means. Okay, background, BG, background, foreground, in front of the action. So this is the rest of the abbreviations. Now, not to confuse, SFX is sound effects, SPFX is special effects. So there's those two. Now, MOS is without sound, and of course they have a little story there about somebody trying to shoot a scene without sound, and you without sound, and of course that became, and it's one of those strange things that happens in cinema. You have all sorts of strange I guess traditions, and then of course point of view. The camera seeing the action from a specific character's position, and that's really a camera angle rather than but it is an abbreviation. Okay, so that is really all I have for you at this point on film scripts and television scripts. As I mentioned, they are two of the those two we do have to cover. It just means that if you do encounter one in the examination, they're not going to be completely alien to you, that you'll have your head around them. And really the focus in the examination is to really examine that text and analyze the text in terms of characters' motivations, what characters are thinking, how does the writer convey meaning through the text, how could it be interpreted by a producer, that it, keep in mind that these things could be interpreted in different ways, but more importantly, how does what exact precise language is used, what language techniques. They can often be very literary pieces of writing, which will use the same literary techniques that we've observed in most of the other texts that we've read. Really important is you must get to a global issue. You have to connect what the writer is saying to some sort of global issue. What is the wider significance of, for example, I mean, if you wanted to talk about 13 Reasons Why, yes, it is about suicide. It's about a very serious problem that needs to be discussed. It's a very interesting series that it talks about the relationships. In that little sequence that we saw, that opening sequence, you could see the gulf between the relationship between the father and the son. There's worlds apart. They even though his father is a teacher and was seen marking books, he doesn't really have an understanding of his son. And the mention of the names of in the original script, when they were talking about the names of the ghetto blaster and the which is now politically incorrect, and the son talking about the boombox, it just sort of shows that they're obviously from different generations, and there's a kind of really huge disconnect there. That's a global issue. That happens everywhere in the world. That's something, if you encountered a text like that, that's what the sort of thing that you could be writing about. So you need to look deep into these texts for the implications. What do they really mean? Okay, so I'll call it a halt there, and thank you very much for your patience. I'm really sorry you have to sit through these videos, which is very one way. You can't ask questions. But I'm hoping that I'm going to be back in school as soon as possible, and I do miss teaching. I hate it. I can't stand this. I really am as long as I'm in front of kids and I'm teaching, I'm happy. Yeah, it's just so boring. Okay, so you guys take care and do work. Do the research that you need to do. Look things up, be interested in stuff, and hopefully I'll see you next week. Bye for now.